Hey, I'm Cyclon, and today I wanted to talk about my variant of the Phys conversion Tornado Shot Magic Finder. Now I have invested at this point, I would say anything between 3 and 4 mirrors into this build. Now I think I got off fairly cheap as I bought many things early and now they are crazy expensive, but overall I'm very happy with how the build ended up. It's not in a perfect state, there's still room to improvement, but it is very good. I also want to mention that this build ended up being very similar to many other variants, but it ended up not there by just copying, but rather by testing out a lot of things, and I have, I think, a few key differences that are worth highlighting out, so I will be doing them separately at the end, so you can just, if you're just interested in those, you can skip to that timestamp. Now, first of all, why Phys? Why not a 3 elemental bow? Now, once you have a Phys bill on a mirror tier level, so you get a mirror, you maybe get a fee, depending on what bow you want to mirror, and then you get that bow, now physical becomes an option. And the reason we want to go physical is the huge amount of damage needed this league. Now, to take a step back, why elemental isn't enough. So let's say we have the Headhunter. Because this league with the Wisp, everything is super tanky, everything is super difficult to kill, especially when you get like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or even more thousands of Wisp juice. The enemies get very beefed up, very deadly. Now, a Headhunter in this case allows us a few things. First of all, it does help a bit with your survivability. It can give you a bit of max life, it can give you a bit of evasion, a bit of armor, a bit of resistances, so it's pretty nice to have, especially when you already found some altars that reduce your resistances. Now on top of that, a Headhunter also offers offensive scaling, like it can give you additional projectiles, it can guarantee crits, it can guarantee hits, it can give you Soul Eater, it can give you a haste buff, but it also, and this is the primary point, it can give you a physical buff and it can give you physical as extra elemental. So with the 3 elemental bow, we get all this quality of life, we get the speed, we get the clear, that's all nice, and it's already pretty good. But when we add the physical into the mix, we get a lot of damage on top, and that is the damage we want so that we have an easy time on those high juiced maps. Talking about 3-winged, 4-winged, or quad-winged scarabs, talking about elevated sextons, 8-mod map with difficult modifiers, so you just juice the quantity into the absolute oblivion. And because those are the maps that give the best amount of loot. And to run these, you do need those additional damage from the Headhunter. So that is why we are interested in the physical bow. And then we, of course, because we want that physical bow, we need some form of getting that conversion going. Because we only having the physical damage is not enough yet. So we need some forms of scaling it into elemental damage. Which also allows us to be immune to physical reflect as we don't do any physical damage anymore. Meaning another modifier we don't need to care about in the maps. In order to convert into or physical complete into elemental, there are a few approaches. You could use a 20% on your quiver, that is one source. Another source is 40%, up to 40% on a Watcher's Eye while you were affected by hatred. Another source is Mastery, the Cold Mastery for 40% on the tree. But the best source we currently have access to is up to 65 or actually 70% on your gloves. Now, the easiest way to do this is any roll of an unveiled prefix physical damage converted to cold, combined with the implicit of Eater of Worlds, giving you, when you go to Exquisite, which means you need to roll up it once, up it twice. So you go to Grand, up it once to Exceptional, and then use an Orb of Dominance one more time to get it to Exquisite. You then have 60% on gloves and can get the other 40% on the tree, allowing you now to have 100% conversion. And now you're online on the high amounts of damage. So this is our base damage scaling. We then have Hatred for more damage, getting more as extra, and from that point we just snowballing. Now there's one modifier Headhunter, at least as far as I know, cannot give us, and that is crit multi, which is why that is the biggest source of damage we want to scale on every piece that we have access to, at least after we got our quantity sorted out, after we got our rarity sorted out, and we got our conversion sorted out. So for the next discussion will be Simplex versus Focused Amulet. Now, a Focused Amulet and a Simplex Amulet have one key difference: 2 prefixes versus 2 suffixes. With a Focused Amulet, you could go for a quantity suffix, and you could go for Phys extra prefix, or you could go for a life prefix, or you could go for life prefix, or you could go for projectile speed, projectile damage prefix, which is great with the mastery. But if all of these do scale on the same level as your Headhunter will give you buffs. But if you go for the Simplex Amulet, get it with your secondary suffix, you can get crit multi, which it's actually quite a bit of crit multi you can get there, allowing you to get to a very high crit multi level, which on top of all the scaling Headhunter gives you is just a more multiplier on top of it. So that's why crit multi in the Simplex Amulet is better than a Focused Amulet. Just wanted to highlight these two things before we take a full look at the build. Alright, now let's take a look at the build as with the usual guide. For Ascendencies, starting off with a normal Ascendancy, we have the options of Gathering Winds, Far Shot, Endless Munition, and Focal Point. Now I have seen people use Ricochet, or have seen people using Ricochet with Forbidden Jewels. As to why I'm not doing it, I will be getting to in a moment. My choice this league with Focal Point was for damage. I tried out Ricochet, I tried out Gathering Winds, I even tried out the Mirage Archer one, where you have the stationary Mirage Archers to try to get more coverage and resulting in more damage, but none of these felt as good as just having the Focal Point for the Sniper's Mark effect, letting the enemy take increased damage, and just quickly nuking the enemies. Like I said earlier, I did even try out the Warlord's Mark setup, and while during the map it felt really great, whenever it was actually mattering that I needed the damage, that I needed the Berserk, when there was just a rare standing that was just super beefy or boss or unique, then I didn't have the uptime on it. That was why I swapped back to Sniper's Mark and stick with Focal Point. Now for our other Ascendency, to take that ahead of everything else, we have the Primalist. Primalist, of course, gives us the additional rucksack. I don't know how to pronounce it in English. I'm just going to use a German pronunciation. And gives us 20 additional inventory spots. On top of that, once we have done all the quests, we have 3 charm spots. The best choice of charms would be getting 2 to 3 with additional projectiles and 1 with adrenaline. Now the third one would be then on the jewel. We then, for the suffixes, the best would be getting 13 to 15% spell suppression, 10 to 20 chance, I think it was, chance to blind on hit, and lastly, the good one would be getting access to either power charge on crit, if I don't say anything wrong, no, phasings it was, sorry, and the last one would be phasings. Those would be the best suffixes. Now, of course, this is extremely expensive, and the best choice, or the choice I stayed with, to be on a, I know it sounds weird, but on a budget, even in a mirror build, there are different budget levels. So to stay on a reasonable budget, at least at the point where I bought them, I went for 2 Skills Fire additional projectile spell suppression ones. Then I got one very early with Adrenaline Recover Life when I use a flask, which does help quite a good amount with survivability. We're getting hit quite a bit, so when we keep using our flask by killing other things or by attacking, it does help with recovering our life. And then we can utilize a Z which was taken to gain things like Power Charge on crit, Culling Strike, Critical Strikes have Culling Strike, Reflect Immunity, Onslaught, or Phasing, or whatever we didn't got on the charms. Now, the best setup that I can recommend is getting 2 charms with a projectile, 1 with adrenaline, getting combined on those 3, 13 to 15% spell suppression, and on one of them you would like to get either a phasing, or you would like to get the phasing or the flask recovery, and then on the dead which was taken you get Culling Strike, crit Culling Strike, either of those 2 with Onslaught. Now, by no means that's gonna be cheap, but that is the best. The second best option is, on your Z which was taken, you get Power Charge and Onslaught, and you use a Frenzy Mana Forge setup with Culling Strike on it. This is by no means as consistent as getting it on a jewel, but it will be a lot cheaper. Because when I was looking for one, I just didn't found any with Culling Strike and Onslaught on the trade website. Now, to supplement that, we did drop out of phasing and blind because that is what's getting cheaper, and this is the first difference that I did to many other people. Instead of going Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh, I used one jewel socket for Searching Eye Jewel with Corrupted Blood, and then the chance to gain phasing and the chance to blind enemies on hit. So now I have my blind, I have my phasing, and I have my Corrupted Blood covered with one jewel spot. That was worth quite a bit. Now technically we could also get life on it, but at that point it's so rare to get the 3 mod combination on top of Corrupted Blood that I don't want to recommend it. I don't even know how many of these specifically are on the market, but I would recommend getting the phasing over the blind. The blind is very nice, but the phasing is so required this league. Just like the Headhunter, just like the damage is required, getting phasing to be able to run away from the mob when you can't one-shot them is very much important. Now, that taken ahead, that is the Ascendancy choices. So we have our primary Ascendancy and the Primalist as a secondary Ascendancy, being a very nice combination. I've seen builds using the also of the Magi and using a tincture, which is interesting. You get a little bit more quantity out of it, but overall I think the additional projectiles, the adrenaline, the spell suppression, it's just too much value in those charms. We really don't want to miss out on those. Alright, the rest of the tree is fairly simple. Now, there are already a lot of similarities on the tree with the elemental versions. We are using Massive Sword of Hope, we need Charisma for the Reservation efficiency, plus a small node. We going for 2 clusters this league again to get the damage. I know the best cluster setup is Feeds the Fury, Fuels the Fight, Martial Prowess, plus a 12 passive with increased effectiveness, life, chaos with attack speed. But that is again something that I didn't run for that step yet, and I am taking a break from magic finding, so I will mention that it's good. But alternatively, you can get an arcing shot, Fuel the Fight, Smite the Weak. Now, by this specific node combinations on the first and the second cluster, we don't need to take the third node on either one, so we can just utilize having the first 2 nodes, and we save 2 passive points. And when we later get to the large one, we have Martial Prowess, Fuel the Fight, and Feed the Fury on 1, where we just need to grab the 2 additional nodes, and we're dropping out of Arcing Shot because we don't need that anymore at that point, because we just deal massive amount of damage. The rest of the tree, we do need Fangs of the Frost to get that Cold Mastery, and also something that I haven't mentioned in earlier guides because I only recently picked it up, is knockback enemies if you get a critical strike is also very, very powerful this league. Then we get to the rest of the jewels. There is a Lethal Pride we want to take. The Lethal Pride node should be a mix of strengths. At some point, at somewhere, you need plus the 10% chance to intimidate enemies, and then there should also be some chance to double damage, at least 10%. So my recommendation is getting about 10% increased strength, 10 to 20% double damage, while 20 is already way too expensive and quite rare, and then 10% chance to intimidate is my preferable sweet spot. We want the strength because it helps us getting our life to 4k, which is just a nice level of comfortness. Then on the last 2 jewel spots, I guess last 4, we have 2 medium clusters. One has to be Special Reserves by Concoction, again getting more flask effectiveness. So that means our Deviation Distillate from Magic Finding is giving us increased effect, but also helping us with the other flask, helping us with survivability. And then the Special Reserve gives us a bit of damage and a bit of regen, which is just nice to have. On the other jewel, I used to like Precise Technique, Quick Getaway, but again, we don't really need crit that much with the Headhunter, so a Repeater Streamlined is better. And also on the small node, you can get a bit of int, helping you to get the needed int to get your gems to the desired level. The last jewel spot, second last normal jewel spot, is gonna go to a Watcher's Eye. Now, early you want, even despite its cost, you want a Watcher's Eye with Chaos Resistance while affected by Purity of Elements. The Chaos damage is very deadly this league, and you do want resistance against it. And if you can afford a secondary good mod on it, anything that is Enfeeble, immunity to Enfeeble, a chance to evade while affected by Grace, crit damage by precision, attack damage, precision, life on hit, vitality, all of these are pretty good to have. But in the end, the best one you want to get would be Purity of Elements base crit hatred, or Purity of Elements Phys is extra cold hatred, or anything hatred later on, because those will be the most powerful. But again, those are very expensive. Now, once you have that cluster, the increased effect cluster with 12 passives, you're going to get a lot of Chaos Wrath there, allowing you to drop the Chaos Wrath spell affected by Purity of Elements on the Watcher's Eye, which will mean that you have more space to get a decent other Watcher's Eye, or you have the Chaos Wrath on top and getting Chaos Wrath capped. Either option can be fine. Now, finally, the last jewel spot is again something that I did differently. To fit the auras that we want to use in this build, we need a lot of reservation efficiency. You can solve that by getting either a level 5 Awakened Enlightened, which is very expensive this league. You can solve that by trying to get a synthesized helm with reservation efficiency and a normal Enlighten, or what you can do is you get a 2 passive 84 small cluster with reservation efficiency, and getting it rolled to 35% increase effect, and then just like with the large cluster with 12 passives, you can get anything like life there, stats there, and any or whatever else you like, and that is going to help you with your stats a little bit, and it will also allow you to fit your reservation while not having to spend a mirror on any of those other things. So this is again like I guess a budget option, but I really like it, and it allows me to have efficiency over my auras without spending too much more investment on the build, and this is what allowed me to swap into the cold conversion setup very quickly after I got my first mirror farmed, that is. Now, the rest of the tree is already very similar. We have some flask effect, we have some spell suppression. To get to our spell suppression cap, we already had that 13 spell suppression from the Primalist Ascendency, from the charms. Then we need Entrench and the small node leading up to it, as well as the 3 nodes up to Inveterate, as well as the node Inveterate. And then we are at 87% spell suppression, so we're going to be needing 13 more spell suppression on our gloves, which will be the rare spot we can have them, or on our helmet. If we get them on the helmet, we're going to be needing intelligence on the gloves, which I get to in a bit when we get to the gear. But that is for the spell suppression. Then the rest of the tree is relatively simple. We are investing a lot in the cluster, so we're just taking crit chance, crit multi. We're getting the inversion of resistances, which is very important this league, again because we do need the damage. We take a few nodes in the range of the massive cluster that also overlap with the Lethal Pride, and that's really the tree. I don't know, I can't really say much to the tree because at this point, at least for me, looks like a very basic PoE build tree. Now, moving on to our skill setup. The skill setup is interesting. Now, normally, at least for most of the league, most PoE builds using a double 6 link for damage, but because we do want that hatred on top of our defensive auras, because again, this league is very deadly, we have only 1 link for damage. My preferred 6 link for damage is Tornado Shot, linked to Awakened Fork, Mirage Archer, crit damage, inspiration, elemental damage with attack support. Now you could use Awakened Vicious Projectile as well, because we have Phys conversion, we would be converting that more Phys damage into a more elemental damage, but I don't like the reduced in attack speed that much, or at least for the few maps that I tested it with, it didn't feel that good. Overall, it should still be strong. For those, this is specifically for those that want to duo, that don't need the big aura setup. A secondary 6 link, what you can take is, you drop Mirage Archer out of your first 6 link, where you then can put in Vicious Projectile, and you have a secondary 6 link for damage that is Tornado Shot, Mirage Archer, Mana Forged Arrow, elemental damage with attacks, Awakened Fork, and then any other support like Inspiration to get the reservation, get the cost a bit low so you can keep triggering it with your mana pool. This will allow you to have 2 6 links for damage again that both work with your Phys damage. This is just a verbal recommendation for duos, as I do get those questions from time to times. Then we do have another, we have a utility setup. using Steel Skin that can be linked anywhere, having a Frenzy linked to a Mana Forged Arrows, and then depending on if you have Culling Strike or Power Charge on Crit on that which was taken, you then have either Culling Strike support or Power Charge on Crit support here, just so you don't have double the same. If you have the Culling Strike on the Jewel, you get the Power Charge here. If you have the Power Charge on the Jewel, you get the Culling Strike here. We then have a Life Tap, Sniper's Mark, Mark on Hit, Frostblink setup, allowing us to have always our mobility and our mark setup. So the mark, sometimes we run out of mana, so we want to guarantee the mark applied, because the bow, for our bow skill, for our tornado shot, we can get the mana leech in, but sometimes it's not enough to trigger the sniper's mark, so we want to always guarantee it, so we link it to life tap. And we also link our Frostblink here, because sometimes there are those mana siphon enemies. I absolutely despise them. But so we can guarantee dash away from them. We then also have our Frostblink linked to a life tap, so we can reposition, get a bit of mana back, shoot, and kill it. Then we have our first big Aura Link setup, linked an Enlightened level 4 in a +1 body armor, combined with the reservation we have on the tree, and 9% reservation we have on the helmet as an implicit. We now have a level 5 Enlightened in those things, linked to a Hatred, Purity of Elements, where you do want 20 quality, because the quality isn't aura effect anymore, it's also more normal res. Petrified Blood, preferable 21-20, but we can also take a 20-20, because it does get one level from the body armor, and then a 20-20, a 20 or 21 Wall Grace. The Wall Grace is because we aren't really using any other wall skills, so we do have just a free Wall Grace on top, giving us a bit of chance to evade attacks, as well as lucky spell suppression. That is definitely nice to have this league. It's not required, but it's a nice thing to have, especially if you just pop up a Legion and you can't afford to die, because then you would lose your Headhunter buffs and you would likely lose a Legion. Then we have Blood Rage linked in this setup, just because there is a green spot we have it open. We can also have Blood Rage in the helm and the Steel Skin in the setup. It doesn't really matter in this case. And finally we have our last 4 link linked with an Arrogance, Dread Banner, Vitality, Precision. Now the Vitality, Precision are both flat aura, so if you set this build up, check your PoB what your reservation is. This league, because of again Headhunter buffs and Divination Distillate, we want to be at 65% unreserved mana. 64 is fine, 66 is fine, but 65 should be the aim, and you should be going for, this is roughly what you get if you have roughly 4k life. Because if we just have barely 50, our Divination Distillate will keep running out. If we have too much empty over 50, we have too much unneeded life pool, because we're not going to get there. But if we have too little, like if it's only reserved a little bit over 50, the Divination Distillate again is going to fill up, so we can't afford that. We need, this is the sweet spot where we have most of the time enough uptime on it, because there are some Headhunter buffs that with the Divination Distillate just keep filling your life, so we do need that specific sweet spot. Alright. This ends up with the gear. Now there is an optional gear section which I'm going to take ahead. If you're looting, or if you want to be really safe, you can at any point replace your Simplex Amulet with the Defiance of Destiny, giving you a bit of resistances, giving you the same anointment, and also giving you a bit of life, which you might not have on the amulet, but most importantly it gives you gain missing unreserved life before being hit by an enemy. Now most of the time we will die to one-shots due to a juiced up yellow or blue map while looting, but sometimes it is a multi-hit, and in that case it can help. Or when you just getting started in a really juiced map, you can put that in until you get a few Headhunter buffs and then quick swap into a Simplex Amulet. So that's a nice pickup to have in your inventory, especially with the rucksack, with the additional inventory space. Another thing that is great for looting, that is of course a rather min-maxable approach, is using a Mage Blood and then using a Silver Flask, which you just swap in for looting. Alternatively, or on top, you can also have an offhand swap, Advancing Fortress, Shield Charge with faster attacks, just to move faster around the map. I also like to have an Enduring Cry in my offhand for those maps that have Desecrated Ground or Burning Ground, in case I just swap to an Elemental Reflex setup, which is a potential possibility, but for that I have something I will be mentioning a bit later if I don't forget it. And then we can also, just for this, have a cast when damage taken temporal chains or enfeeble setup. So if we dash into a pack and they're actually mobs, they're gonna hit us, they get cursed with that, and then we swap and we have enough time to kill them. It's just a level of precaution. You can also add a portal gem or whatever you prefer in there. This is just what I choose for my offense swap. So we have that potential for having a looting setup to get the looting done a bit quicker, because most of the time in those juice magic farm that we will be spending with looting. The rest of the gear is as following. We have the physical bow, then we're either going to be utilizing our elemental quiver from before, or if we have saved up another mirror, we can pick up a mirrored quiver, something like crit chance and crit multi again getting there. Phys is extra elemental, can be getting there on the implicit. Then we have crit multi, we have physical damage, we have life, additional arrow, mark effect or projectile speed, and then damage with bow skills. Now, based on statistics, our mark effect is nice to have, but projectile speed should be better, for the simple reason of projectile speed is both reach and damage. So because we are using the mastery that our speed also affects our projectile damage, meaning the more speed we have, the further our projectiles fly, so we have more potential of off-screening enemies. And then we have also the potential of getting the damage from it. But mark effect is also nice, because when we have a sniper's mark, we fired something, there's going to be more mark splitting, but we also already have a pretty big mark effect from our Ascendency, so this is just, it's really just a difference of maxing or min-maxing stage 1 and min-maxing stage 2, whatever you want to prefer. Both is a viable option. Then we are going to be utilizing our gloves. I already mentioned that we want to have physical conversion there, but there are a few other things we also want on the gloves. One of them being the temple modifier, increased damage with hits against chilled enemies. Then we do want spell suppression, as said, either on gloves or helmet. Then we have an open prefix where we can get anything like life or elemental damage. If we have only one open prefix, we're going to get for life. If we want to further min-max this, we would be utilizing Eldritch Crafting to get a life roll on it and craft damage while leeching, which can't be unveiled, and we already have the unveiled physical damage as the third prefix. And for the suffixes, you can either go with Chaos Rest, which is a defensive, or you can go with Attack Speed, which is an offensive modifier. In really both it's fine. I prefer the defensive Chaos Rest. Then on the second implicit, we want Rage. Now, we are not going to be using Berserk. Rage is be used as a permanent buff. It does give us more than Intimidate. We already have the Lethal Pride for Intimidate. It's just better than any other implicit we can get on the gloves, outside of the conversion, of course, which is on the other modifier table. We then are getting to our quantity and rarity sources. So of course the first quantity source is Goldworm. We have 19 to 20 quantity roll we want there. We want to combine those with a movement speed modifier, because Greed's Embrace does nerf our movement speed, sending it, giving us a minus 20. So we want to get at least a 9% implicit roll, so we have a 19, so the reduced movement speed is kind of balanced out. Now, of course, with a 20, that would be exactly balanced out, but a 9 roll is good enough. And if we want to really splurge on the build, we could get a second implicit like Region while moving, Spell Suppression to ease on the Charm use or on the Glove use, or we could get something like an minimum endurance, maximum endurance charge if we want to juice up with a Headhunter that sometimes gives endurance charge. There are a few options we can go for, but the movement speed is, in my opinion, required at this point. Then we do have, of course, the Headhunter, which you potentially could get a quantity or rarity implicit. It's not that expensive that if you invest a lot into the build, it's unreachable, but that is, of course, purely optional. Then we have our quantity on the amulet. Like I said, a Simplex is a bit better than a focus amulet, so we have 20 quantity on our amulet. This is the next 20 quantity source we have. Then we can get anything like crit multi there, we can get life there, we can get projector speed and projector damage there, or we can get rarity there. Rarity would be the more min-maxable approach. There are some mirror Simplex amulets around where you can go double rarity or quantity crit multi rarity. Depending if you have enough damage or not, I would prefer, I would say, the crit multi, but again, if you have enough damage, the double rarity is also fine. At this point we should be able to have enough damage so we can use the Greed's Embrace, so you can get 14 to 15 quantity as well as 40 to 50 rarity. Do look that your cold resistance modifier isn't too low, so you are cold resistance capped, and your fire rest should also be kept due to the high roll on the boots, which leaving you just with a very likely uncapped lightning resistance. So to get our lightning rest as high as possible, this should be after focusing on quantity and rarity on Aventur's Gamble. So we look for 10 quantity, then we look for anything between 35 and 40 increased rarity. We look for a 20 plus life modifier, then we look for positive fire and cold rest, but definitely look for a high lightning rest, and in this combination this should allow you to have your fire and cold rest capped and an almost capped lightning rest. Now of course, the more money you have to spend on this build, the higher the lightning rest should be, so that your lightning rest can be kept without the uptime on Divination Distillate, which is the last source of quantity on the build, which can give us another 12 quantity, which is increased by the flask effect, should be up to 14 quantity. Then we also have the sources of rarity. We already had the rarity on the Greeds, we already have the rarity on the Ventors. On top of that we have potential rarity on the Serenity, on the Simplex Amulet, and then we have rarity on the Divination Distillate. On top of that we can get rarity on our helmet. So getting back to the int on the helmet, we do have some gems that require int. We have the increased crit damage support that requires 111 int. We have Purity of Elements that require 98 int. We have the Enlightened requiring 96 int, and depending on what level we want, we have a Frostblink requiring what I would recommend level 15 Frostblink for 123 int. So we need 111 to 123 intelligence, so that is why we want a high int roll on our helmet or on our gloves and getting the spell suppression roll on the other piece. Then we have a rarity prefix, we have a rarity suffix, we have the crafted rarity against slain, rare or unique enemies, and then we have a life prefix and a random third prefix, which is fine to be whatever. And that's really it on the gear. For the flask, we do have another rarity source. We do have a gold flask that is already giving a 30 increased rarity. Then we can get it rolled with increased effectiveness and craft another 30 rarity. So this is 60 rarity already, and then the increased effect is applied, just giving us another massive rarity boost. For the other flask, there is the Quicksilver and the Jade flask, and the suffixes are crit chance and evasion rating, and the prefixes can either be increased effectiveness or combined really well with, for survivability, with the recover life. When you use a flask, we can get the flask charges on getting hit, allowing us to get, when we get hit, we get the flask charges, we recover life, so we have a better sustain, or we can get increased effectiveness, which is also nice to have. For the last flask spot, we already had the divination net for the second last, so the last flask spot is a Progenesis. So to recap, the build, has been pretty long, so here's gonna be a very quick TLDR, or TLDL, I guess. We use a Phys bow because Phys bow scales well with a Headhunter. We get all the sources of quantity, like a Simplex Amulet, Goldworm Boots, a Ventur's Gamble, plus a Colorless Touch or a second Ventur's Gamble, then finally Greed's Embrace and a Divination Distillate. We have Rarity from Divination Distillate, Ventur's Gambles, Greed's Embrace, and then our helmet, as well as a gold flask. We utilize the Headhunter for the temporary buffs. We then have either the old quiver when we are lower budget, or when we get a second mirror we can grab a mirror tier quiver for even more damage and crit multi. Our tree includes a massive thread of hope. Our flask setup includes a Progenesis. We are trying to clear Magic Find maps very efficiently, and the few changes that I did very differently from everybody else is I am using a Searching Eye Jewel for Corrupted Blood, Phasing and Blind, and I am using a small Reservation cluster with 2 passives and 35% increased effectiveness with a life roll on it to fit all my auras, only using a +1 body armor and an Enlightened level 4 instead of an Awakened Enlightened level 5. Alright, all that being said, hopefully this video was informative and at least a bit amusing to watch. If you have any recommendations, anything to improve on these kinds of videos, I really want them. I wanted this year focus a lot on the quality and somewhat on the quantity of my videos to at least get out one in a week. So if you have any feedback on that, I would really appreciate that. All that being said, Any questions, comment section, any feedback, comment section, or you can message me live on Twitch, or you can message me on Discord, designated channel, or via DM. I will try to answer as quickly as possible. Video been long enough. Have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next video. Bye!